Tony Storm won that gauntlet to the surprise of no one because the winner of the gauntlet was going to go on to Grand Slam Australia to challenge Mariah May for the AEW Women's World Championship. The same show that has turned into a total catastrophe for Tony Khan. This right here is the most embarrassing story of the week. And I have to talk about Tammy Sitchin a little bit. But this right here, I almost have no words for this. Let's take it back to the summer. Right before All In at Wembley last year, there was talk, actually it was a story that broke in the Sporting News in August, that AEW was planning on running a big stadium show in Australia at some point in 2025. And they were looking at 3 different venues. They were looking at Sydney's Alliance Stadium, Melbourne's Marvel Stadium, and Brisbane's Suncorp Stadium. They were looking at all of them as possible locations for a big show. And then on the pre-show for All In, they made the announcement that they were heading to Suncorp Stadium in Brisbane on February 15th for Grand Slam Australia. And the stadium is home to the Brisbane Broncos. It has a capacity of about 52,000, although an Ed Sheeran concert there once did 59,000. For a concert, you figure there's going to be more room on the floor. So figure for a wrestling event, you're probably looking at somewhere, if you want to max out capacity, probably 50 to 55,000, right? So it's like, wow, okay. Well, look, I mean, they had 50,000 last year in Wembley, right? 70-something thousand the year before that, but we've seen them before pack in a stadium for a big international show. I was just curious what the market is for AEW down there in Australia, because everything I've read and everything I've heard is that they don't have strong TV down there. So I don't think they would have the same fan demand down there that they did in the UK. The UK, they have a rabid wrestling fan base. And so it made sense that their first time there, they were going to get a huge crowd. So the stage was set for them to have this big Australia show. And there was still some confusion about whether or not it was actually, going to be a pay-per-view or not. Because obviously Grand Slam is what they've been calling those special dynamites at Arthur Ashe Stadium for the last few years. And then we found out, well, there may be more than one. It doesn't mean they're not going back to Arthur Ashe this year. They'll just do multiple Grand Slams, and this one just so happens to be in Australia. But Tony Khan, I think back in November, had even said that doing a pay-per-view there would be challenging, like a live pay-per-view, because of the time zone difference being what it is, and it would just be very difficult. So there was confusion about what kind of show is this going to be? Is this even going to air on TV? Are you going to go to a stadium and do a glorified house show? Like, that doesn't make any sense. So obviously it would have to air somewhere in some form or fashion. So then there was talk that maybe it would be Max exclusive. It could be their first ever exclusive streaming event on Max. And that's what I assumed it was going to be. Like, I already knew it wasn't going to be a pay-per-view, but I thought it would be like a Max special. Like WWE has their Peacock specials. But then as the weeks went on, and then they announced this gauntlet match, I was thinking about it the other day, and I said, wait a minute. They still haven't told us how or where the show is airing. And I know we have a little bit of time, but like, it's January and the show is in February. You would think that by now they would at least give us some clarity on, like, how are we going to be able to watch the show? Is it going to be on Max? Is it going to be on pay-per-view after all? Is it going to be on TV? We have to take it back even before that, because the embarrassment didn't just take place this week. The embarrassment took place when in November we learned that AEW was going to be moving the show out of that stadium in Brisbane to the much smaller Brisbane Entertainment Center. So you went from a stadium show with 50,000 people, even if they tried to get 25 or 30,000, you went from that to running just an arena. I think that has a capacity of maybe 13,000. That alone was a complete embarrassment, because the only reason they moved the show is because they couldn't sell tickets. That's it. Simple as that. If they could sell tickets, enough tickets to make it worthwhile to run the stadium, they never would have moved the show. There was no scheduling conflict. They moved the show because they could not sell tickets. So that was a black eye for AEW. But then this week we get the gauntlet, and finally, After Toni Storm wins, they put a graphic up on the screen for their match. Toni Storm against Mariah May. And in the graphic, it says that the show is going to air February 15th, 8 p.m. Eastern, 7 o'clock Central, and it's got the TNT logo, and it says streaming on Max. I don't even think the announcers said anything. But at least in the graphic, it told us, how and where the show is going to be airing. And I'm like, well, hey, at least we got some clarity on this, right? Then we come to find out it's not going to be airing at 8 p.m. Eastern time. And the reason being, there is a gigantic scheduling conflict because TNT is having its NBA All-Star Game coverage that night. So the show can't air at 8 p.m. Eastern. And I guess they can't just put it on TBS. That would seem to be the thing that would make more sense, but I guess they can't. And so based on the latest reports, the show instead is going to be airing at 2:30 a.m. Eastern time, which is 5:30 p.m. Australian time. I guess that's when the show starts, 5:30 locally. But 2:30 in the morning Eastern time. It's like fucking Wrestle Kingdom starts in the middle of the night. That is when this show is going to air on TNT. It will immediately follow, I guess, all their coverage of NBA All-Star Weekend. And I guess the idea is that if it's going to follow the NBA coverage, they may get a nice boost. I question how big of a boost they're going to get at 2:30 in the morning. I think that's just a way to try to positively spin this. There is no positive way to spin this. This is a fucking embarrassment. I mean, they literally had the graphic up on TV this week, and then I guess only found out. Now, when I say embarrassment, it's embarrassing for AEW. It's not necessarily their fault because this is also on Warner Brothers Discovery. This may have been some kind of a fuck up on their part too, for all we know. And maybe Tony Khan now has to bear the brunt of it. But they're all in the same boat together. This is embarrassing all around for everybody. For Warner Brothers, for Tony Khan. It would be laughable if it wasn't so sad. So now they're not going to get any audience. I don't care. I don't give a shit what lead-in they have. They're not going to get any real audience at 2:30 in the morning. They're going to air this show on a 21-hour tape delay. And it may be delayed on Max as well. See, that's the thing we don't know yet. I have not gotten any clarity on whether or not this show might air live on Max. If it airs live on Max, that's good, because I'll just watch it on there. But if it's going to be delayed on there too, I mean, this is just a total debacle. And think about the cost, the expense to fly all of these people, talent, production, agents, everybody. Fly them all down to Australia for a show that only the diehards are even going to bother watching, at least live, in front of a crowd 1/3 the size of what they originally thought they were going to get. It hardly seems worth it. It makes it seem like the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing as far as WBD and AEW. It's as if the minute they moved the show from a stadium to an arena, they lost interest in even doing it. There hasn't exactly been a ton of promotion for it. Now all this stuff. But we're going to get Toni Storm getting her rematch on that show with Mariah May, and maybe we'll get Moxley defending his title against Adam Copeland, unless they want to save that for Revolution. But I would assume we'll get that match on that show, and we'll see what else Tony Khan decides to put on that show as opposed to saving, because Revolution's only a few weeks later and airing at an actual decent time, too, unlike this show.